I was one of the lucky few who were ever allowed to meet him. He almost never stopped working, or planning, or thinking. Looking down at him, I wondered how one man could do so much, even with the time he had. His species was a short-lived one, but he fought that. Genetic editing held his flesh together until it started to give him cancer. Then he started replacing his limbs with ones he crafted from plasteel and ivory. Some say he was born at the same time as a star, and was trying to outlive it. But even the strongest metal corrodes. His are deep red, like the hungry giant so very close to death. Even still he was smiling, and he finally opened the door, the mask of his final piece. I walked into the room, expecting to look up at some massive wonder, but the only place to look was down, and down below was grandeur. He had built this piece by piece with his own hands, every one of the millions of layers unique, all hidden beneath the outside. A deep, smooth, black orb the size of a large moon, deep set in the planet. He began to speak, to tell me not his tale, but the tale of his work. He told me of his origins, a contained singularity with 7 plasmatories surrounding it, using gravity rather than magnetism to work. This was his first creation, the compact fusion drive. It revolutionized the galaxy, but it wasn't what he wanted to make. These became the first layer, a delicate sphere of 12 CSDs, all directly connected to a laser pointing directly to the center. This was power enough, but barely directed and unstable. So the second layer was built, high-speed quantum computers making trillions of calculations per spin, controlling the beams. This creation could cross singularities much more efficiently than any other method, but it still wasn't what he was trying to build. This became the inner core of his creation. The first layer of the outer core was of neutronium batteries. This was only possible after he found a way to increase the efficiency of gravity sinks. This involved a significant amount of energy being used at first, with a much smaller amount needed to maintain. The second layer was the cooling array, with Bose-Einstein condensate factories keeping the absolute zero graphene coils stable as they absorb the immense amount of heat emitted by the batteries. The third layer was the containment chamber in case of emergencies, a kilometer-thick wall of stable quark material, hexagonally layered together with anti-gravity generators throughout to prevent the structures around it from being pulled in. It is unknown if this would be enough if containment were to fail. The fourth layer was a set of wormhole rings, keeping access across the containment chamber open, as the chamber itself was completely solid. Most of the rings were one-way access, sending in commands and energy, and letting the graphene coil inside. But there were 5 two-way wormholes which were set to shut off automatically upon failure. This completed the outer core. The mantle itself was mostly thousands of repetitive layers of computers and circuitry, housing the meat of his creation, as well as the AI that managed, processed, and tended to the other parts of the mantle, the circuit forest. This was a custom ecosystem made for the sole purpose of part repair, each species tailored specifically to produce the necessary components and recycle broken parts. The Hawking radiation from the black holes also provided enough mutation chance to push the ecosystem to become more efficient. To make sure the ecosystem didn't evolve in a way that didn't adversely affect production, a cyborg predator population was introduced that would be attracted to faulty or foreign substances. The crust was made mostly to protect the creation from outside dangers, and to manage data to and from the core. The first layer itself was the router hub, bending space to let information travel faster than light through to the mantle, and compiling important data to be sent back out to the control center. The second layer was the control center connection. The control center itself used to be a large screen cluster and keyboard, but it is now just a spherical slot on a sea of interpretation mechanisms and data passers. The control center could be detached, and the connection would make sure that from anywhere in space and time, the user could control the machine. I didn't understand how he punched through relativity, but he did. The Galactic Council of Chronal Events was sent into a frenzy when I relayed my report. The third layer is the shell. This is the final layer, the outer layer. It is nearly completely atonomically smooth, made of jet black borphine, and has very few entry points. There are a few maintenance hatches and the door to the control slot. This completed his machine. When his story finished, I could do nothing but look at him in awe. Such a machine, such power. but he still hadn't told me what it was made for. He seemed to read my thoughts and stood with great effort from his bed, his joints creaking loudly with each step as he walked towards me. It was only then I noticed that the control slot door had opened, right below us, and the control center had risen up to us. He asked me for a favor, the final favor he would ever ask of anyone. Place me into my work, so I can experience what it feels to be whole. He knelt down, the top of his head opening to reveal the last true piece of his body, his brain. It was in a pristine mechanical holding chamber, perfectly sized for the control center. It did not look at all old, perhaps that's where he spent the most of his earnings, preserving it. I took him gently out of the body, and slotted him into the control center. It slowly moved back down into the machine, the door closing to complete the smooth black shell. Finally, he activated his machine, and I looked at the view screen monitoring the core. 12 completely black lasers shot into the core, intercepting each other, and beginning to build up energy. From a ball of plasma to a singularity to a hole in space-time, the center grew in energy, and at the point where I thought it would breach the first layer, it started to shrink instead of growing, getting smaller and smaller until it came to a point, and the laser stopped. I could see space warping around the point before it suddenly grew, so fast that I couldn't register it. In an instant, it was a pure white sphere, energy rippling at its surface as it was held at one size, the lasers occasionally hitting it at specific points with bursts of energy. This could only be one thing. A universe. A small contained universe all in this machine. That's when I saw the text string across the bottom of the view screen. Reality engine activated.